Archangel Michael says, someone you love is calling to you right now, from somewhere you cannot see, but somewhere closer than you have ever imagined. Stop scrolling. This message is not like the others. Sit still for a moment. Let whatever name just came to mind stay there. That was not random. You have felt it before, haven't you? A presence in a quiet room. A warmth that arrived without explanation. A thought that felt like it belonged to someone else, arriving gently in the middle of an ordinary day. Archangel Michael says, that was them. Reaching toward you, the way they have been reaching toward you since the day they left. In every way love is still permitted to reach across whatever distance separates this life from whatever comes after it. You have wondered if they know how much you still think about them. If they see the way certain songs, certain smells, certain ordinary objects still stop you mid-motion, pulling you back into a memory you didn't expect to encounter that day. They know. Nothing about your grief, your love, your memory of them has gone unnoticed. Think about the specific moment their absence hits you hardest. Maybe it's the quiet hour before sleep, when the house goes still and your mind finally has room to wander toward what you've been too busy to feel all day. Maybe it's a particular chair, a particular smell of coffee, a particular time of year that used to mean something different when they were here. Archangel Michael says, they are present in exactly those moments, not causing the pain, but sitting inside it with you, closer than you realize during the times you feel most alone in your grief. There is something they want you to know today, something simple, something that has been waiting for the right moment to actually reach you clearly. They are proud of you. Not despite everything that has happened since they left, but because of how you have carried it, imperfectly, honestly, without pretending it didn't hurt. You have carried guilt since they passed, haven't you? Guilt over the last conversation that wasn't warm enough. Guilt over the time you didn't visit as often as you meant to. Guilt over laughing again, moving forward again, building a life that continues without them physically present in it. Archangel Michael says, release that guilt today. It was never the currency love required from you. The love between you and this person was never measured by your last conversation or your busiest, most distracted week. It was measured by the whole of it, every ordinary year, every quiet act of care that never needed to be spoken aloud to be real. They know you loved them. They knew it while they were here, in ways words never fully captured, and they know it now, more clearly than ever, unclouded by the distractions and misunderstandings that sometimes complicate love while it is still being lived out in an imperfect world. Think about what you would say to them if you had one more conversation, right now, uninterrupted, with all the time in the world to actually say it. Say it anyway. Say it out loud if you can, quietly if that feels safer. The words matter more than whether an audible answer comes back to you. Archangel Michael says, love does not require a body to keep listening. What you say today reaches further than you might expect, across whatever distance currently separates you from them, arriving exactly as it was intended. There is a specific sign they have been trying to send you, something small enough to be easily dismissed as coincidence if you were not paying close attention. A number that keeps appearing. A song that plays at exactly the right moment. A dream more vivid than dreams usually are, one that left you with a feeling you couldn't quite explain the next morning. Think about the last time something like this happened. Something you almost dismissed but that lingered in your mind a little longer than it should have if it were truly nothing. Consider, today, that it may not have been nothing at all. Archangel Michael says, the space between this life and the next is thinner than most people assume, especially where love this real is concerned. Love does not end because a body has stopped. It continues, quieter, changed in form, but no less present for those willing to notice it. Consider what unfinished business still sits between you and the person you lost. A goodbye that came too suddenly to feel complete. Forgiveness never fully spoken, in either direction. A question you never got to ask, or an answer you never got to give. That unfinished business does not have to remain permanently unresolved simply because they are no longer here to hear it spoken aloud. Archangel Michael says, speak it anyway, today, in whatever way feels most natural to you. Ask for the forgiveness you never asked for. Offer the forgiveness you never offered. These words, spoken honestly, still reach them, still matter, still carry weight even across the distance that currently separates you. You have wondered whether they know how hard things have been since they left, whether they see the specific weight you have carried quietly, without fully explaining it to the people around you who assume, by now, that you have mostly moved past it. They know. Grief, witnessed from where they now are, is understood far more completely than it ever could be from here. Archangel Michael says, they do not want you trapped in that grief forever. They want you free, eventually, to remember them with more warmth than pain, to smile before you cry rather than the other way around. That shift takes time, more time than anyone else may have patience for, and it is not something you can force. But it is possible, and it is closer than it feels right now. If this message reached you today, believe that it reached you because someone specific wanted you to receive it. Comment below the name that came to mind while reading this, if you feel comfortable sharing it. Share this with someone else who has lost someone and may need this exact reminder today. Thank you for staying with this message until this point. There is more still to say, because love this deep rarely fits into a message this short. Archangel Michael says, consider what specific tradition or ritual might help you feel closer to them going forward, something you build into your life deliberately rather than leaving connection to happen only through unpredictable moments of sudden grief. Lighting a candle on their birthday. Visiting a place that mattered to both of you. Speaking their name out loud on the anniversary of their passing, rather than letting the day slip by in silence out of fear of upsetting people around you. Consider starting a new ritual today, something specifically yours, a way of honoring their memory that fits naturally into your life going forward rather than feeling forced or performative. It does not need to be elaborate. Simple, repeated gestures often carry more meaning over time than a single grand act of remembrance offered once and then forgotten. Archangel Michael says, you have likely noticed that certain objects connected to them have taken on significance far beyond their simple physical value since they passed. An old sweater that still smells faintly like them. A handwritten note tucked somewhere safe. A piece of jewelry you now wear more often than you used to. These objects are not simply sentimental clutter. They are vessels, carrying memory and connection in ways words alone cannot fully capture. Consider what it would mean to actually use these objects sometimes, rather than only keeping them stored away, untouched, treated more like relics than living connections to the person you loved. Wearing their sweater on a difficult day. Writing in a journal using their old pen. Keeping their photo somewhere you will actually see it daily, rather than tucked into a drawer where it is easy to forget. Active remembrance often feels more alive and more comforting than passive preservation alone. Archangel Michael says, grief has a way of isolating people, convincing them that no one else could possibly understand the exact shape of what they have lost. That isolation, however understandable, often deepens pain rather than easing it. Consider who in your life has also experienced significant loss, and whether connecting with them, even briefly, might offer a kind of understanding that people who have not walked a similar loss simply cannot fully provide, however well-meaning their sympathy might be. Consider joining a grief support group if you have not already done so, or simply having one honest conversation with someone who has walked a similar loss. There is real comfort in being understood without needing to fully explain every detail, comfort that comes specifically from shared experience rather than from sympathetic imagination offered from the outside. Archangel Michael says, "You have likely felt guilty for moments when grief seemed to briefly lift, when you found yourself laughing genuinely, enjoying something fully, forgetting for a while that you were supposed to be sad. That guilt is common, and it is misplaced. Moments of genuine joy do not betray your grief or your love. They are simply evidence that you remain fully alive, capable of the same full range of human emotion you always had, grief and joy both included, often within the very same day." Think about the specific fear underneath that guilt, the fear that moving forward somehow means leaving them behind, forgetting them, loving them less than you did while grief was at its sharpest and most immediate. That fear does not reflect reality. Moving forward and continuing to love someone who has passed are not mutually exclusive. You can do both simultaneously, fully, without either one diminishing the other in any way. Archangel Michael says, "Consider what this person would actually want for you, if they could speak to you directly right now, without any of the complications death introduces to ordinary communication." Most people, asked to imagine this honestly, recognize that their loved one would want them to live fully, to find happiness again, to build a life worth living rather than a life defined permanently and entirely by loss. Consider writing a letter to them today, saying everything you have wanted to say since they passed. Update them on your life since they've been gone. Tell them what you miss most, specifically, rather than only generally. Ask the questions you never got to ask while they were still here. This exercise, simple as it sounds on the surface, often provides more comfort than people initially expect before actually trying it themselves. Archangel Michael says, "There is a particular kind of conversation that continues even after someone has passed, happening in the quiet moments when you think of them unprompted, when a memory surfaces unexpectedly during an ordinary task, when something reminds you of a specific thing they used to say or do that you had almost forgotten until that exact moment." Consider those moments as a continuing dialogue, rather than simply intrusive reminders of loss interrupting your day. Think about a specific piece of wisdom or advice this person gave you while they were alive that continues, even now, to guide decisions you make in your daily life. Consider how often you actually apply that wisdom, whether consciously or not, and consider that their influence continues, active and present, every time you choose based on something they taught you, directly or simply through the example of how they lived their own life. Archangel Michael says, "Grief often arrives in waves rather than as a single, steadily diminishing feeling that simply fades with each passing month. You may feel mostly at peace for weeks at a time, only to be suddenly overwhelmed by a fresh wave of grief triggered by something small and entirely unexpected. This pattern is normal. It does not mean you are grieving incorrectly, or that you have somehow regressed in your healing after making real progress. Consider being gentle with yourself during these unexpected waves, rather than frustrated that grief has resurfaced when you believed you had already moved past it for good. Grief does not disappear on a fixed, predictable timeline. It softens gradually and unevenly, in its own time, regardless of how much you might wish it followed a more orderly, more predictable schedule. If this message reached you today, believe it reached you because it was needed, exactly now, in this specific season of your grief or your healing, whichever describes where you currently stand. Comment below if you feel this message speaking directly to your own loss. Share it with someone who has also lost someone they love, someone who may need this exact reminder today. Thank you for staying with this message until this point. There remains one further layer to this message, and it may be the part most worth carrying forward once the sharpest edge of today's grief has softened. Archangel Michael says, the person you lost is not asking you to grieve perfectly, or to heal on a specific schedule set by other people's expectations, or to feel a particular way at any given moment. They are simply asking you to keep living, keep loving, keep moving forward, carrying their memory with you rather than being permanently anchored by its weight alone. Think about what forward motion would actually look like for you right now, given everything you have been carrying since their loss. It does not need to be dramatic. It might simply mean re-engaging with a hobby you set aside without meaning to. Reaching out to a friend you have been avoiding out of sheer exhaustion. Allowing yourself to make a plan for the future again, something you may have stopped doing entirely in the immediate aftermath of losing them. Archangel Michael says, consider what this person taught you about living well, and whether you have been honoring that teaching since they passed, or whether grief has quietly paused your application of it without you fully realizing that pause had happened. If they taught you to be generous, consider practicing generosity again, deliberately. If they taught you to find joy in small things, consider actively looking for those small joys again, rather than waiting passively for joy to simply return on its own timeline. You have likely wondered whether they are disappointed in choices you have made since they left, decisions they might have advised against, paths they might not have chosen for you themselves. Consider that love, real love, does not require agreement on every single decision you make. It simply requires continued care for your well-being, which remains present regardless of whether every choice matches what would have been their first choice for you specifically. Archangel Michael says, today's message is not only about comfort. It is also, gently, a genuine encouragement worth taking seriously. Do not let grief become an identity you build the rest of your life around indefinitely, at the cost of everything else that could still bring you meaning, connection, and genuine joy. Grief deserves its full space and its full time. It does not deserve to become the entire architecture of who you are for the remainder of your own life. Consider what parts of your identity existed before this loss, parts that may have quietly faded as grief took center stage for a while. Interests, friendships, ambitions you once held with real enthusiasm. Consider reintroducing those parts of yourself gradually, not as a betrayal of your grief, but as a genuine return to fuller living, which this person, more than almost anyone, would likely want for you. Archangel Michael says, you are allowed to build a full life again, one that includes both continued love for the person you lost and genuine engagement with the life still available to you right now. These two things are not actually in competition with each other, however much grief sometimes convinces people otherwise. A full life does not require an empty space where grief used to occupy every corner. It simply requires room for grief to exist alongside everything else, rather than displacing everything else entirely and indefinitely. Consider what it might feel like, someday, to think of them and feel warmth first, before sadness, rather than the reverse order grief often imposes during its earlier, sharper stages. That shift is not guaranteed to happen quickly, and it is not something you can force through sheer willpower alone. But it is possible, and for many people who have walked significant loss, it eventually arrives, quietly, without announcement, one ordinary day when a memory brings a smile before it brings tears. Archangel Michael says, in the meantime, while you are still somewhere in the middle of this process, be patient with yourself. There is no correct timeline for grief, no specific number of months or years after which you should feel entirely healed and unaffected. Some people carry a version of their grief for the rest of their lives, in a softened, manageable form that coexists peacefully alongside an otherwise full and genuinely happy life. That coexistence is not a failure to heal completely. It is simply what love that ran deep enough to survive death actually looks like, continuing quietly, without demanding to dominate every part of your remaining life. Think about the specific ways you have grown since this loss, painful as the growth may have been to acquire. Loss often teaches perspective that is difficult to gain any other way, clarity about what actually matters most, patience with other people's struggles, a deeper capacity for empathy born specifically from having walked through something genuinely hard yourself. Archangel Michael says, you are allowed to hold both truths simultaneously. You would trade every bit of growth this loss taught you to have them back, and also, this growth is real and valuable and worth acknowledging honestly, without guilt attached to that acknowledgement. Consider what you would want someone you love to know, if you were the one who had passed, watching over them the way this person is now watching over you. You would likely want them to know you were proud of them, that you loved them completely, that you wanted them to live fully rather than being permanently defined by missing you every single day. Extend that same understanding to yourself now, trusting that this is likely close to what your loved one genuinely wants for you as well. Archangel Michael says, there is a specific kind of peace available to people who allow themselves to fully feel their grief, rather than suppressing it entirely or rushing past it toward premature, false closure. Peace does not arrive by avoiding pain. It arrives, eventually, by moving through it fully and honestly, at whatever pace that process genuinely requires for you specifically, without comparing your pace to anyone else's. If this message reached you today, believe it reached you because it was needed, precisely now, precisely for this specific loss you have been carrying. Comment below if this message spoke clearly to a loss you have experienced in your own life. Share it with someone who has also lost someone they love, someone who may need exactly this reminder today. Thank you for staying with this message until its very last word. One more thing before this message truly ends. Consider the specific season you are in right now, and whether it might be time for a small act of forward motion, something you have been postponing until you felt ready enough, healed enough, strong enough to finally attempt it. Archangel Michael says, readiness rarely announces itself clearly in advance. It often arrives quietly, in the middle of actually taking the step, rather than fully before it. You do not need to feel complete. Ready to take that next step forward. You only need to be willing, imperfectly, uncertainly, to take it anyway, trusting that readiness will catch up to you along the way. Whatever that step looks like for you specifically, whether it's re-engaging with work you set aside, opening yourself to a new relationship, or simply allowing yourself a full, uncomplicated day of joy without guilt attached to it, consider taking it soon, not because grief has fully ended, but because life continues to ask something meaningful of you even in the middle of loss. Think about what this person contributed to your understanding of courage, of resilience, of what it means to keep going even when things feel genuinely difficult. Consider drawing on that understanding now, applying it to your own healing the way you once, perhaps, watched them apply it to their own difficulties while they were still here with you. Archangel Michael says, their courage did not end when their life did. It continues, transmitted through you, through the ways you learn to face difficulty by watching how they faced it themselves. Draw on that inheritance now, in this specific difficulty of grieving them, the way you might draw on any other lesson they taught you throughout the years you shared together. Consider, finally, what gratitude you can genuinely hold for having known this person at all, even though the cost of that connection was eventually losing them. Some people go through their entire lives without ever experiencing a love as significant as the one you shared with this person. That is worth acknowledging, even while grieving its ending, because both truths, the gratitude and the grief, belong together, inseparable, each one giving the other its full weight and its full meaning. Archangel Michael says, "Love this real does not disappear. It simply changes shape, continuing to influence your life long after its original form has ended in the way you once knew it." That continuation is not a consolation prize for losing them. It is the actual, ongoing presence of a love that was real enough to survive even death itself. Before you truly close this message, take one more quiet moment. Sit still for a few seconds, wherever you currently are. Think of their face, clearly, the way you remember it best. Let yourself smile if a smile comes naturally, and let yourself cry if that comes instead. Both responses are welcome here. Both are honest. Both are honoring the love that made this particular loss so significant in the first place. Archangel Michael says, this quiet moment matters more than any single sentence written in this entire message. Words can point toward comfort, but the actual comfort arrives in moments like this one, when you allow yourself to simply be present with your memory of them, without rushing past it toward the next distraction waiting in the rest of your day. Consider what you might do differently tomorrow, having sat with this message today. Perhaps a small ritual of remembrance, chosen deliberately. Perhaps a conversation with someone you have been avoiding about this specific loss. Perhaps simply permission to feel whatever tomorrow brings without judging yourself harshly for however grief decides to show up on that particular day. Archangel Michael says, tomorrow is not guaranteed to feel easier than today, and that is all right. Healing does not move in a straight line toward ease. It moves in its own unpredictable pattern, and your only job is to keep showing up for it, gently, one day at a time, exactly as you have been doing since this loss first arrived in your life. You have already survived every difficult day since they left. That is not nothing. That is evidence of a strength you may not fully credit yourself with, built specifically through the hardest thing you have likely ever had to walk through in your entire life. Archangel Michael says, they know that strength. They see it in you, clearly, and they are proud of every difficult day you have survived, every quiet moment of grief you have moved through, every small step forward you have taken since losing them. If this message reached you today, believe it arrived at the exact right moment, carrying exactly what you needed to hear about someone you love who is calling to you from somewhere you cannot fully see, but somewhere far closer than you have ever imagined. Thank you, one final time, for staying until this very last word, and for letting both the grief and the comfort in this message find their way to you today. Rest now, knowing you are watched over, loved, and never truly walking any of this alone. Archangel Michael says, one final reflection before this truly closes. Grief and gratitude, held together, are what make a life fully lived rather than one lived only on the surface. You have loved deeply enough to grieve deeply, and that is not a burden to resent. It is proof of a connection most people go their whole lives hoping to experience even once, and you were fortunate enough to have it, however painful its ending eventually became. Consider the specific way you want to carry their memory forward, not as a weight, but as a quiet source of strength available to you whenever you need it. A phrase they used to say, spoken now in your own voice, passed forward to someone younger who never got to meet them. A value they held, lived out through your own daily choices, long after their voice has gone quiet in the physical world. This is how people continue, not through permanence of the body, but through permanence of influence, carried by everyone who loved them enough to keep it alive going forward. Archangel Michael says, "You are that person. You are the one keeping their influence alive, whether you fully realize it in any given moment or not. Every time you choose kindness because you learned it from them, every time you face difficulty with courage because you watched them do the same during their own life, they continue, through you, in a world they can no longer physically walk through themselves." That is the final truth of this entire message. They are not entirely gone. They live on, quietly, steadily, through you, and through everyone else who carries a piece of what they gave while they were here. Carry it well. Carry it forward. And know, without doubt, that they are calling to you still, proud, and grateful for exactly who you have become since they left. Consider one last time everything you have read here today, and let it settle in you slowly over the coming days, rather than all at once. Some truths take time to fully land, and that is entirely all right. You do not need to have everything resolved immediately. You only need to keep walking forward, gently, carrying their love with you as you go. Archangel Michael says, that is everything for today. Walk gently, remember fully, and live the life they would be genuinely proud to see you living, exactly as you already are. Consider, before you go, saying their name out loud one more time, quietly, wherever you happen to be right now. Let it be spoken with love rather than only sorrow. Names carry weight, and speaking theirs today, deliberately, is its own small act of honoring everything they meant, and continue to mean, to you. God says, this message is now complete. Carry what you needed from it, and let the rest go gently. They are watching, they are calling, and they will always, in some real form, remain with you. Consider what peace might feel like, fully, someday, once this grief has softened into something gentler than it feels right now. That peace is not a betrayal of your love. It is simply what healing looks like when it is finally allowed to complete its slow, patient work in you, in its own time, at its own pace, exactly as it should unfold. Archangel Michael says, walk forward now, gently, knowing you carry more love than loss, even on the days it feels like the reverse is true. That love was real. It still is. And it will remain part of you for as long as you live. If this message reached you today, believe it reached you because someone specific wanted you to receive it, exactly as it was written. Thank you, sincerely, for staying with it until this very last word. Someone you love is calling. Listen closely, and know you are never truly out of reach of that love. God says, before you go, one last reminder. Whatever you were feeling when you first opened this message, whatever ache or hope or quiet question brought you here today, know that it did not go unanswered. Love met you exactly where you were, and it will keep meeting you there, again and again, for as long as you remain open to receiving it. Archangel Michael says, walk forward today a little lighter than you walked into this message. That lightness is the blessing, already working, already changing something in you, quietly, gently, exactly as it was always meant to. Consider what small kindness you might offer someone else today, carrying forward some of what you have just received, extending it outward rather than keeping it only for yourself. Consider the specific way grief has changed how you see other people's suffering, likely deepening your capacity for empathy in ways you may not have fully credited until reading this message today. Use that empathy today, deliberately, with someone who may be quietly struggling with their own grief, their own loss, their own difficult season that you might not otherwise have noticed without your own experience to draw from. Archangel Michael says, "This is part of how love continues, moving through you toward other people who need exactly the understanding your own loss has given you. Consider it not as a burden, but as a gift, one that only exists because of everything you have walked through, painful as that journey has been to complete." Think about what it would mean to become, over time, someone who offers other grieving people the same comfort this message has tried to offer you today. Not immediately, not before you are ready, but eventually, as your own healing progresses, consider that your story, honestly shared, could become exactly the reminder someone else desperately needs to hear. God says, this is often how grief eventually transforms into something meaningful beyond the pain itself, becoming a bridge between your own experience and someone else's need, connecting people through shared understanding in ways that would not have been possible without the difficult journey you have already walked. If this message reached you today, believe that it was meant to reach you exactly now, and consider that one day, your own experience of this exact grief might become someone else's lifeline. Thank you for staying with this message until its true and final word, and for allowing both the sorrow and the comfort within it to reach you fully today. Someone you love is calling. And someday, you may be the one calling to someone else, offering exactly what you needed most today. Before you close this message completely, take one final moment. Place your hand over your heart, feel it beating steadily, and consider everything that heart has carried you through since this loss first entered your life, bringing you to this exact point, reading these exact words, still standing, still loving, still here. Archangel Michael says, that heart is stronger than it was when this loss first happened, not because it stopped feeling pain, but because it learned to keep beating faithfully even while carrying real, genuine difficulty. That is not a small thing. That is, in many ways, the entire point of everything you have walked through since they left. Consider what you want to say to yourself right now, in this exact moment, having read everything shared in this message today. Not what you think you should say, but what genuinely feels true, given everything you have just been reminded of about your own journey through grief and love. Say it, quietly, to yourself, and let it be the thought you carry forward as you close this message and return to the rest of your day. God says, whatever you just said to yourself, hold on to it. It matters more than any single sentence written in this entire message, because it came from you, applied specifically to your own life, your own loss, your own hard-won healing. Archangel Michael says, one more thought before this message fully closes. Consider revisiting this message whenever grief resurfaces unexpectedly, whenever you need reminding that the person you love has not actually stopped calling to you, in whatever quiet, subtle ways love continues reaching across the distance that currently separates you. If this message reached you today, it reached you because you were finally ready to receive all of it, having done the difficult work grief requires. Trust that readiness. Walk forward from here, carrying everything you have been reminded of, into whatever comes next in your own healing. Someone you love is calling. Everything has now been said. What you carry forward from here is yours to decide. Archangel Michael says, thank you for staying with this message until its very last word today. That patience itself says something about how deeply you loved, and how deeply that love continues, quietly, faithfully, on both sides of whatever distance currently exists between you and the person you lost. Consider what tomorrow might bring, and consider meeting it with a little more openness to the small signs, the quiet moments, the unexpected feelings of presence that may continue arriving in the days ahead. They are not imagination. They are connection, continuing in the only ways it is still permitted to reach you from where they now are. God says, this message is now truly complete. Carry what you needed from it, release the rest gently, and trust that the love you shared with them was never something death could fully take away from either of you. Archangel Michael says, walk gently, remember fully, and know that you are never as far from them as grief sometimes convinces you that you are. The distance is thinner than it feels, and the love remains exactly as real as it always was. Consider one final breath before you go, slow and deliberate, marking the true close of this message and the continuing presence of a love that death was never actually able to end. God says, go now, in peace, carrying their love with you, exactly as you have carried it every single day since they left. Archangel Michael says, one truly final thought before this message ends. If you have felt tears while reading this today, let them fall. If you have felt a smile forming somewhere in the middle of the sadness, let that come too. Both are honest responses to a love that was, and still is, entirely real. Consider what you will do in the next hour, something small, that honors this exact moment of connection you have just experienced. Perhaps simply sitting quietly a little longer before returning to the rest of your day. Perhaps calling someone who also loved this person, sharing a memory neither of you has spoken aloud in a while. Perhaps simply allowing yourself to feel, fully, without rushing past it toward whatever task waits next. God says, whatever you choose, let it be gentle with yourself, understanding that grief and love this significant deserve space, not rushed efficiency, in how you carry them forward through an ordinary day. Archangel Michael says, they are calling, and you have heard them today, clearly, in whatever form this message needed to take to actually reach you. That is enough. That has always been enough. If this message reached you today, believe fully that it was meant for you, exactly as it was written, exactly at this moment in your life. Thank you, sincerely, for staying with it until this true and final word. Someone you love is calling. Listen. And know, without any doubt remaining, that you are heard in return. Consider, one final time, what this specific message stirred in you today, and whether it matches something you have quietly sensed but never fully allowed yourself to trust as real. Trust it now. Grief has a way of making people doubt their own intuition, convincing them that hope for continued connection is simply wishful thinking rather than something worth trusting. It is worth trusting. Archangel Michael says, love this real does not require proof in the way ordinary facts do. It asks only for openness, a willingness to notice what is already there, quietly present, waiting for you to stop dismissing it as coincidence or imagination. God says, this is the true and final word for today. You are loved, you are watched over, and you are being called to, gently, consistently, by someone whose love for you never actually ended. Archangel Michael says, walk forward now, carrying that truth with you into everything the rest of today still holds. Consider sharing this message with one more person before you go, someone whose own loss came to mind while you were reading this today. That act of sharing may be exactly what carries this same comfort forward into their life as well. God says, that is truly everything for today. Rest, remember, and know you are loved beyond the reach of any distance. Archangel Michael says, "Thank you, truly, for opening this message today and for staying with it fully until the very end. Few take the time. That patience says everything about how much this love still means to you. Consider what you now understand differently about this loss, having read all the way through this message today, compared to how you understood it before you opened it. That shift, however subtle, is real, and it belongs to you now, ready to be carried forward into every day still ahead." Archangel Michael says, "Carry it gently, carry it well, and know their love continues, quietly and faithfully, exactly as it always has."